A convoy of trucks slowed to a halt. RAF Bassingbourn, Cambridgeshire, June 19, 1945. 23 German women climbed down onto British soil for the first time, squinting against afternoon sunlight. None of them expected what came next. Speaking of unexpected, it'd be unexpected if you didn't hit that subscribe button. Helps bring more forgotten stories like this. But to understand how these women arrived here, we need to rewind 4 weeks. May 15, 1945. The war was over, but the machinery of processing continued. Obergefreiter Lena Hartmann, former Luftwaffe Signals Auxiliary from Hanover, surrendered with her communications unit near Flensburg. She'd spent 3 years coordinating fighter intercepts, tracking Allied bomber streams on plotting boards. Her commanders had assured her the British were struggling, their airfields damaged, their logistics chaotic. She'd believed it because the alternative, that everything she'd been told was propaganda, was too enormous to contemplate. Hartmann and 22 other women were processed through a British holding facility at Schleswig, then transporting west by convoy. They crossed into Belgium, then northwest through liberated Holland. The journey took 4 days. None of them spoke much. What was there to say? On June 18, they boarded a Channel steamer at Calais. Hartmann stood at the rail, watching the white cliffs materialize through morning mist. England, the enemy homeland she'd helped defend Germany against for over 3 years. Now she was being delivered there as cargo. They landed at Dover that evening and were transporting by truck to a transit facility near Maidstone. The next morning, June 19, they were loaded onto trucks again, this time headed northwest toward Cambridgeshire. The British officer in charge, a captain from the military police, spoke serviceable German. You'll be held at Bassingbourn temporarily while arrangements are made for repatriation. Cooperation is expected. Bassingbourn, Hartmann recognized the name from Luftwaffe intelligence briefings, a bomber station. Heavy losses had been inflicted there during the Battle of Britain, or so they'd been told. The convoy arrived mid-afternoon, passing through security gates into what Hartmann initially assumed was a small section of the airfield. Then she realized this wasn't a section. This was the entire facility, and it was enormous. The perimeter track stretched for what looked like miles, dotted with concrete hardstands every 150 feet. Each hardstand held a Lancaster bomber, 4-engined, massive, dwarfing anything she'd seen in Luftwaffe service. She started counting. 10, 20, 30 bombers visible from the truck, more dispersed further out, partially obscured by buildings. Look, if you're tired of AI-generated history and want the real deal with actual research, membership link is below. Anyway, back to it. The truck stopped near a cluster of temporary buildings designated for prisoner accommodation. As the women disembarked, ground crews worked around them with casual efficiency that bordered on theatrical. A Lancaster was being refueled at the nearest hardstand, 2 trucks positioned on either side, hoses running to the wings. Hartmann watched the crew chief check his clipboard, signal completion, and move on to the next aircraft. The whole operation took maybe 12 minutes. Obergefreiter Elsa Brenner, former anti-aircraft auxiliary from Essen, stood beside Hartmann. How many aircraft do they have here? I counted 37 from the truck, Hartmann said quietly. There are probably more I couldn't see. That's, Brenner trailed off. She'd served at flak batteries defending synthetic oil plants. By late 1944, her unit was rationing ammunition. They'd been told repeatedly that Allied production couldn't sustain both theaters. The evidence before her eyes suggested otherwise. Over the next 2 days, the women were housed in barracks near the airfield perimeter. They had limited movement, but clear sightlines to ongoing operations. Hartmann watched Lancasters taxi out for training flights, formations of 6 or 8 aircraft, taking off at 90-second intervals with mechanical precision. She watched ground crew service aircraft in rotation, refueling, rearming, conducting maintenance with an efficiency that suggested unlimited resources. On June 21, a full squadron exercise involved 18 Lancasters taking off within 20 minutes, forming up overhead, then executing coordinated bombing runs on a practice range 30 miles north. Hartmann stood at the fence line watching. The aircraft returned 2 hours later and was serviced, refueled, and ready for operations again before sunset. Total operations capacity. Your capacity to support us is simple. Just hit that subscribe button. Brenner approached that evening. I did some calculations, she said quietly. Based on what we've seen, this one station could launch more sorties in a day than our entire northern defense sector managed in a week by the end. I know. Were we ever going to win? Hartmann had no answer. She'd believed in German technological superiority because the alternative was unbearable. Now that alternative was demonstrating itself with arithmetic precision. One British bomber station, operating casually in peacetime conditions, possessed more operational capacity than entire Luftwaffe regional commands had managed under combat stress. On June 23, a logistics officer conducted a routine briefing. Through their interpreter, the women learned that Bassingbourn was one of over 700 military airfields Britain had constructed or operated during the war. The number felt impossible. Germany, at peak capacity, had perhaps 200 fully operational military airfields. Hartmann sat on her bunk that night, processing what she'd witnessed. For 3 years, she'd coordinated defenses based on intelligence reports that consistently underestimated Allied capabilities. She'd believed those reports because they came from command. Now she understood command had believed them too, because the truth was too destabilizing to accept. For the full story, check out membership. Thanks for watching. The gates of Bassingbourn opened for the last time in August 1945. 23 women walked out, bound for repatriation to whatever remained of Germany. They carried knowledge that would haunt them, not just of defeat, but of how completely they'd misunderstood the enemy they'd served years fighting. The airfield behind them continued operations, indifferent, its machinery of logistics and precision grinding forward into peacetime as efficiently as it had through war.